Just seconds into Game 1 of the Bucks vs Nets series, James Harden went down with a hamstring injury. For any other team or any other player, most likely would mean that they're getting eliminated shortly. And while it's still bad news, the Brooklyn Nets might actually still win the championship and James Harden could win a ring without even playing. I say this because the Nets handled the Bucks just fine without James Harden, and I don't see another team standing in their way. I mean, look at Philly. They just lost Embiid, and the Hawks are too young and only have one superstar in Trae Young. So they're not going to be a threat to the Nets. So that brings us to the finals. Well, they could play the Suns, they could play the Jazz. There's a couple of different teams they could play, but do you really see them losing to any of them? Because Chris Paul right now on the Suns is hurt, and he's still dealing with that shoulder injury. We don't know if he's ever going to get to 100%, and they're not beating Kyrie and KD no matter how good Devin Booker plays. So let's look at the Jazz. They got Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Jordan Clarkson. They got a good team. They might be a challenge for the Nets, but I still don't see them beating the Nets, and that's because of one player, Kevin Durant. As for the Dallas Mavericks, they have a similar problem that the Atlanta Hawks have, as they only have one great player and he's very young, but they just don't have the cast to handle Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and this Brooklyn Nets squad. This is because Kristaps Porzingis is wildly inconsistent, whether it's due to injury or just him not being aggressive, so it requires Luka to do a lot of the heavy lifting. He generates a huge amount of Dallas's offense, and I just don't see it being enough to single-handedly take out the Brooklyn Nets, and I honestly don't even see them making the finals in the first place. As far as matchups go, the Los Angeles Clippers taking on the Brooklyn Nets would be the best scenario, but the problem is we haven't seen Paul George in an NBA Finals, but if he plays like he did in the first round, they'll be fine. But that leads us to other problems, like the supporting cast. We know they have Rajon Rondo, and he's going to show up and he's going to be big time. But the Nets also have a good cast. They have Blake Griffin, who's actually playing really well now. They have Joe Harris. They got Jeff Green when he gets healthy. They got a whole squad going. And the problem with the Clippers is they got guys like Reggie Jackson and guys that are just super inconsistent. One game they'll drop 20 and the next they'll have 6 turnovers and miss every single shot. They lost to Williams and they're missing him, and they're also missing Montrezl Harrell, who the Lakers didn't even play. The evidence of this is staring us right in the face. If you look at this Clippers and Mavericks series, the big problem they've had is Paul George shows up, Kawhi Leonard shows up, and a little bit of here and there, Rondo and Reggie Jackson. But outside of those guys like Nick Batum just haven't played up to their normal standards that they did in the regular season, and that's really hurt them.
Pat Bev trick y'all, man, like he play defense. He don't guard nobody, man, just running around doing nothing.
So again, in that situation, I got the Nets winning a close series. And no, I haven't forgot about the Denver Nuggets, but they're missing Jamal Murray. They do have Nikola Jokic, they do have Michael Porter Jr., and they got some great players. But if we're just going by matchups, it's going to be hard for Nikola Jokic to protect the rim when Kyrie and Kevin Durant are driving downhill. This team had holes last season, and while they did fix some of those, losing Jamal Murray is just too big of a spot to fill, and they're not going anywhere without him. So there you guys have it. This series is far from over between the Bucks and the Nets, but I still see the Brooklyn Nets pulling it out and at least winning their home games to take this series away from Giannis and the Bucks. And after that, I just don't see another team standing in their way, even when Joel Embiid gets back on the court. It's going to take time that the 76ers don't have for him to get to 100% and back to his MVP self. And even when things go their way, the other team can just foul Ben Simmons, and he's not going to make all of his free throws, so that already limits their offense. We saw the Wizards do it, so what stops a good team from doing it? And out of all those great teams in the West, the Nets only have to play one, and they only have to take one series to win the championship after finishing up the East. So again, I just don't see anybody standing in their way, with or without James Harden. And after all that work Harden's put in, he'll be glad to know that he can just sit back and watch this championship fall into his lap. But let me know what you guys think of this. Do you guys agree or disagree that the Nets have the best chance to win the championship, no matter who they're playing or whether or not James Harden suits up? Also, leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe for more NBA content just like this. And I will see you in the next upload.